I know you are ready for a new story, but tonight we are going to dive into a different tale than the usual stories. This one is drenched in loyalty and betrayal, bathed in the blood of ambition and ideology, where the price of Rome's future was paid with 23 wounds in the body of a ruler. However, I promise this isn't another story. It's a journey into the mind of a man torn between love for a friend and love for the Republic, a descent into the moral labyrinth where honor and treachery became indistinguishable, where the dagger of salvation became the blade of infamy. I want to tell you about a time when Rome teetered between Republic and Empire, when whispers of tyranny echoed through marble halls, and when the fate of millions hung on the conscience of a few. An era when loyalty to principles challenged loyalty to men, and when the most honorable of acts became history's most infamous betrayal. From the shadows of history, a name emerges both revered and reviled: Marcus Junius Brutus. But who exactly was Brutus, the philosopher-statesman whose dagger changed the course of civilization? The man who killed Caesar yet died for Rome. I challenge you to imagine standing at that crossroads of history, the weight of the Republic on your shoulders, watching your beloved Rome slide toward monarchy. What would you sacrifice? Your friendship? Your honor? Your place in history? Or would you, like Brutus, sacrifice all three to preserve an ideal? Are you ready to bear with me as we uncover how a man of principle became an assassin? How the last defender of the Republic became the first villain of the Empire? How Brutus, in trying to save Rome from a tyrant, instead helped birth the very tyranny he feared? Discover how Marcus Junius Brutus, born of noble blood and republican ideals, became forever entangled in history's most infamous assassination. A man of letters and philosophy, respected in Rome for his integrity and intellect, who would ultimately plunge his dagger into the heart of his mentor and friend. I promise this tale of Brutus is not merely about betrayal, but about the impossible choices faced when loyalty to principles clashes with loyalty to people. When Rome teetered between Republic and Empire, when freedom seemed to demand the ultimate sacrifice, and when a single stroke of steel would echo through millennia. Now, relax in a comfortable position. Our stories don't require you to watch the video. They are narrated to guide you on a relaxing journey to fall asleep as you listen. Feel your body relaxing, your shoulders, your hips. A warm feeling slowly relaxes your entire body from head to toe, as if you are entering a warm bath of soothing water. Your body begins to relax as the water slowly rises from your feet to your legs, your torso, your shoulders. You feel every single muscle becoming more and more relaxed. Feel the comfort of this moment. Focus on the story and allow the narrative to gently lead you toward a comfortable sleep. And now let the world of our heroes begin. My name is Marcus Junius Brutus, and I write these words knowing history may condemn me. I was born to privilege in the year 85 before Christ, during tumultuous times when Rome's republic faced threats from within. My father was executed by Pompey the Great, and my mother, Servilia, was a formidable woman of the Servilian family, rumored to have been Caesar's greatest love. I was raised on stories of my ancestor Lucius Junius Brutus, who overthrew the last king of Rome and established the Republic. The weight of that legacy pressed upon me from childhood. While other boys played at war, I immersed myself in Greek philosophy, finding solace in the Stoic teachings that would later fail to comfort me when I needed them most. Caesar noticed me early. Perhaps because of my mother's influence, or perhaps he saw something in me, a malleable mind, a respected name, a useful ally. He showed me favor despite my family's Republican sympathies. I never suspected then how our fates would intertwine, how the man who treated me as a son would one day fall by my hand on the Senate. My name is Marcus Junius Brutus, heir to a legacy that has haunted Rome for centuries. My ancestor, Lucius Junius Brutus, expelled the last king of Rome, Tarquinius Superbus, in 509 BCE. He sacrificed his own sons for the Republic's sake. When I was born, the weight of that name settled upon me like a crown of iron, both an honor and a burden I never asked to bear. My childhood unfolded during Sulla's bloody dictatorship. I was barely 7 when I first witnessed men dragged from their homes for speaking against tyranny. Their names appeared on lists in the forum, and by nightfall their heads adorned the rostra. My mother, Servilia, would cover my eyes, but never my ears. "Listen," she would whisper. "This is what becomes of Rome when liberty dies." Servilia raised me on stories of the Republic's virtues and stoic resolve. A Brutus feels pain as other men do, she taught me, but never shows it. A Brutus places Rome above himself. At night, I dreamed of my ancestor standing firm as his sons were executed, his face a mask of duty. I woke sweating, wondering if such strength lived in me or if I would break when tested. My education was relentless. While other boys played at war, I memorized Plato and trained in rhetoric until my throat was raw. Athens completed what Rome began. There, beneath olive trees, I debated with philosophers who knew nothing of my name's burden. For those brief years, I was simply Brutus the student, not Brutus the inheritor of revolution. Freedom, I discovered, was sweeter than any wine. Returning to Rome, I found the Republic gasping its last breaths. Civil wars had weakened what corruption hadn't already poisoned. Men spoke of needing a strong hand, the very thing my ancestors had fought to prevent. In the Senate, I watched old men compromise principles for peace. And I, bearing the name of tyrant slayers, sat silent, calculating where duty truly lay in this new, fractured world. What is the worth of a name? Mine was both shield and sword, opening doors while simultaneously marking me for a destiny I couldn't escape. When Caesar crossed the Rubicon, all eyes turned to me, Brutus, descendant of liberty's champion. What would I do when tyranny threatened again? The question followed me like a shadow, growing longer as Caesar's power stretched across Rome. My fate was sealed centuries before my birth. Athens embraced me like a lover. The city pulsed with ideas that Rome could never comprehend. I walked beneath colonnades where Socrates once questioned, my sandals treading the same stones as Plato and Aristotle. Each morning I rose before dawn, eager for discourse that would stretch my mind beyond the practical concerns that dominated Roman thought. The Acropolis stood watch over us all, a silent guardian of wisdom. My tutor Antiochus of Ascalon became more than teacher. He was the gateway to understanding. Under his guidance, I devoured Plato's Republic, finding in it an ideal that made Rome's governance seem crude by comparison. The Platonic vision haunted me, a society ruled by philosopher kings, where wisdom trumped wealth and bloodline. At night, I would debate with fellow students until our oil lamps guttered, questioning everything I had been raised to believe. The Stoics captured my heart with their unyielding commitment to virtue. Their teachings resonated with Roman values, yet transcended them. Virtue alone is good, they taught, and a man must do what is right, regardless of consequence. I spent hours contemplating this wisdom in the gardens of the Lyceum, wondering if such purity could survive in Rome's political arena. My Roman companions mocked my seriousness, but I sensed these ideas would one day be tested. Among fellow Romans studying abroad, I found kindred spirits. Cicero visited briefly during his own studies, his brilliance already evident. We formed bonds stronger than those in Rome, united by our love of Greek wisdom rather than political allegiance. I gained a reputation as a serious scholar, surprising my Greek teachers who expected Romans to care only for law and conquest. In their eyes, I became something unusual, a Roman with a philosopher's soul. The summons finally arrived. My uncle needed me in Rome. As I packed my scrolls and said farewell to my teachers, I vowed to carry their wisdom back to the Forum. I departed Athens with the bitter knowledge that I was leaving the purest version of myself behind. The ship pulled away from Piraeus harbor, and I watched the Acropolis fade into the distance, unaware that my philosophical ideals would soon face their greatest test in the brutal arena of Roman politics. My first steps into the Senate felt like entering a gladiatorial arena. I was 24, idealistic, and woefully unprepared for the battlefield of Roman politics. The marble halls echoed with whispers of alliances forming and breaking like waves against the shore. I clutched my newly acquired quaestorship like a shield, naive to how little it would protect me from the daggers of ambition that surrounded me. Uncle Cato's counsel was as rigid as his posture. Stand firm on principle. The Republic needs men of virtue, not men of expedience. Meanwhile, my mother, Servilia, whispered different wisdom. Make Caesar your friend, Brutus. The future belongs to men like him. I stood between them, torn between ancestral Republican values and the pragmatic politics that might preserve my family's influence. I first encountered Caesar at a banquet hosted by Crassus. While Pompey dominated the room with his military presence, Caesar observed quietly, his eyes calculating everyone's worth and weakness. When he finally approached me, his charm was disarming. The nephew of Cato and son of Servilia must have a fascinating perspective on our republic's future. I sensed then he was measuring me for some future use. My first political challenge came when I opposed a land distribution bill that would benefit Pompey's veterans. My principles demanded it, though my allies warned against antagonizing such a powerful man. The Senate chamber fell silent as I rose to speak. My knees trembled beneath my toga, but my voice did not. I spoke of precedent, of law, of the dangers of military influence on civil matters. The aftermath was swift. Doors that had been open closed to me. Invitations dwindled. Yet others, those who opposed Pompey's growing influence, sought my company. I discovered that in Rome, principles were commodities to be traded, and I had inadvertently established my value. My Stoic teachers had never prepared me for the bitter satisfaction of being respected for making enemies of the powerful. By the end of my quaestorship, I had learned to navigate the treacherous waters of Roman politics without drowning my principles entirely. I saw how Cato's righteousness earned respect but few allies, while Caesar's flexibility gained him power. The republic I had studied in philosophical texts barely resembled the one I served. The cracks were visible, factions forming not around ideas but men, loyalty purchased rather than earned. My time in Cyprus and Cilicia haunts me still. I lent money to the people of Salamis, not as a benefactor, but as a predator. The interest I demanded was 48%, 4 times the legal limit. I, who spoke so eloquently of virtue in the forum, became a different man across the sea. There, far from Rome's judging eyes, I found it easy to abandon principle for profit. I told myself these were merely the workings of commerce, that I was simply following established practice. Yet I employed men like Skeptius, a brutal enforcer who once surrounded the Salaminian Senate with cavalry, confining them until 5 senators died of starvation, all to collect my interest. I knew of his methods and did nothing to restrain him. Cicero, when made governor of Cilicia, was horrified by what he found. "This cannot be the work of Marcus Brutus the philosopher," he wrote to Atticus. "This is the action of a usurer, not a statesman." His words cut deeply because they were true. He refused to use Roman troops to collect my debts, and for this I resented him. I justified myself with cold logic. The Republic needs men of means, I reasoned. My wealth serves Rome. But in quiet moments I knew the lie of it. My Stoic teachers would have been ashamed. Cato, whom I admired above all men, would have condemned me. Yet I continued, building my fortune on the misery of provincials who had no recourse against a Roman nobleman. The contradiction tormented me. In Rome I spoke of liberty and justice. In the provinces I practiced tyranny. I read Plato by lamplight while men suffered for my gain. When challenged, I would cite precedent or necessity. This is how the world works, I told myself, but deep within, I knew I had compromised the very principles I claimed to cherish. Perhaps this was my first great betrayal, not of Caesar, but of myself. The compromise that made all others possible. In Cyprus, I learned how easily principle bends to advantage, how comfort silences conscience. Years later, facing greater moral tests, I would remember this failure. The man who could rationalize usury could rationalize anything, even the murder of a friend. The signs were everywhere, yet we refused to see them. Caesar and Pompey, once allies through my cousin Julia's marriage, grew increasingly hostile after her death. Their fragile alliance crumbled like aged stone. I watched from the Senate as each man positioned himself against the other. Caesar extending his Gallic command, Pompey aligning with the Optimates who once despised him. Rome buzzed with whispers of impending conflict. My position was impossible. Caesar had shown me nothing but kindness. Some whispered he might be my true father, though I dared not contemplate such rumors. Yet Pompey, who had executed my father years before, now championed the Senate's authority and our ancient constitution. Each night I paced my study, torn between personal loyalty and my duty to the republic that my ancestor had founded. Then came the fateful news that January, Caesar had crossed the Rubicon with his legions. I still remember Cassius bursting into my home, face ashen, he marches on Rome. Panic seized the city. Senators fled with their families. My uncle Cato thundered that any true Roman must stand with the Republic. The optimates who had once scorned my family now demanded my allegiance. I spent sleepless nights weighing my choice. Caesar's letters arrived daily, appealing to our friendship and offering generous terms. My mother, Servilia, who held Caesar in highest regard, urged reconciliation. Yet, when I walked through the forum, I felt the presence of my ancestor Lucius Junius Brutus, who had expelled the last king. Could I betray the republic he had founded? My uncle Cato's words haunted me. Rome is not one man's property. I respected Caesar's brilliance, perhaps even loved him as a mentor, but his ambition threatened everything our ancestors had built. The Republic, with all its flaws, protected us from tyranny. Each passing day brought reports of Caesar advancing closer, while Pompey gathered forces in Greece. Time for deliberation was running out. In the end, I chose Rome over Caesar. The decision tore at my heart, but I could not abandon the principles that defined me. I wrote my final letter to Caesar, explaining my position, then departed to join Pompey's camp. Not because I trusted Pompey, the man who had my father killed, but because he stood with the Senate and our laws. Some called it betrayal. I called it the heaviest burden of duty a Roman could bear. I made the most difficult choice of my life in those early days of 49 BCE. Caesar had shown me kindness, even mercy after Pharsalia, yet I could not stand with him against the Republic. The Constitution, our sacred protections against tyranny, mattered more than personal debts. When Caesar crossed the Rubicon, I knew where my loyalties must lie, not with the man, but with Rome itself. The decision tore at me, yet my path was clear. My journey to Pompey's camp in Greece was fraught with danger. I fled Rome under cover of darkness, leaving behind my home and possessions. The sea crossing tested my resolve. Violent storms seemed omens of the tumult to come. When I finally reached the Republican forces, the camp bustled with senators and nobles who had made the same choice. Some called us traitors. I called us patriots. We were the last defense of the Republic. The atmosphere in Pompey's camp swung between excessive confidence and creeping doubt. Veterans boasted of past glories, while new recruits trained endlessly. Our forces outnumbered Caesar's, yet lacked their discipline. I reunited with my uncle Cato, whose stern approval of my choice offered some comfort. Cicero greeted me with his customary wit, though worry lined his face. "So the son returns to the fold," he remarked, wiser than many of his elders. Not all welcomed me with open arms. Whispers followed me through camp. Caesar's former protégé, Servilia's son, a latecomer to the cause. I faced their suspicions directly. "Judge me by my actions here," I told the gathering of skeptical officers, "not by past associations." I spoke passionately of constitutional principles, of senatorial authority, of the dangers of one man's unlimited power. Some nodded, others remained unconvinced. I cared not for their approval, only their unity against tyranny. Pompey assigned me command of a cavalry unit, recognizing my standing if not my military experience. I threw myself into training, determined to prove my worth through deeds rather than words. Yet I grew concerned watching our leadership. Pompey delayed engagement, allowing Caesar to strengthen his position. The coalition frayed. Some sought restoration of privilege, others genuine liberty. I wondered if we fought for the same Rome. At night I penned letters to Porcia, confessing doubts I dared not speak aloud. The eve of Pharsalus brought a strange calm. I walked among my men, offering encouragement while masking my own misgivings about Pompey's battle plan. Under a brilliant canopy of stars, I contemplated the morrow. Would I face Caesar himself across the battlefield? The man who had spared my father, who had shown me favor, could I raise my sword against him? I decided then that principles must guide my hand, not sentiment. For Rome, I would face any opponent. Little did I know how fate would test that resolve. The dawn of August 9th broke blood red over the plains of Pharsalus. Our forces outnumbered Caesar's 2-1, yet unease gnawed at my stomach. Pompey's plan relied on our superior cavalry crushing Caesar's right flank, but I sensed Caesar would anticipate this. As I donned my armor, the weight of Rome's future pressed upon my shoulders. Officers spoke confidently of victory, but their voices rang hollow against the morning stillness. The battle lines formed under the sweltering Greek sun. I commanded infantry on our left wing, watching Caesar's veterans arrange with disciplined precision opposite us. When the horns finally blared, our cavalry charged Caesar's flank as planned. Initial success. They drove back his horsemen, yet suddenly Caesar unleashed hidden cohorts who attacked with javelins. Our cavalry, unprepared for infantry, broke in confusion. The tide turned in an instant. Chaos erupted as Caesar's reserves smashed into our exposed flank. I fought desperately, my sword arm leaden with exhaustion, my shield splintering under repeated blows. All around me, men I had dined with the previous night fell screaming. The metallic scent of blood filled my nostrils as our lines crumbled. I watched in horror as our center collapsed, and Caesar's veterans pressed forward with mechanical efficiency, their discipline never wavering. Then came the moment that will haunt my dreams forever. Pompey, our great general, turned his horse and fled the field. His personal guard followed, abandoning their posts. The sight crushed what remained of our army's spirit. Men threw down their weapons and ran or stood numbly, awaiting death. Our cause, the Republic itself, disintegrated before my eyes. All our grand speeches of liberty meant nothing against Caesar's ruthless efficiency. I escaped with a small group as darkness fell, our path lit by burning wagons and the moans of the dying. We rode through the night, each man silent with his thoughts. My mind raced. Should I join Cato in Africa to continue resistance? Flee to the east? Or end my life honorably as a Roman should when defeated? The republic I had sworn to defend lay shattered. What purpose remained for Brutus, heir to the tyrannicide tradition? 3 days later, I made the decision that would forever mark me. I surrendered to Caesar. When his messenger found me, I sent back my sword. Many called it cowardice. Perhaps it was. Yet something told me Rome's story was not finished, nor was mine. Caesar pardoned me immediately, even embraced me as a son. I accepted his clemency while shame burned within. The vanquished have no right to pride, but perhaps we retain the duty to endure. I stood trembling before Caesar after Pharsalus, awaiting judgment. The battlefield's blood still clung to my sandals as guards brought me before him. His eyes found mine across the command tent, recognition dawning like a slow sunrise. For a moment, silence hung between us, heavier than my armor had ever been. I had chosen Pompey, betrayed our friendship, yet something in Caesar's gaze held not rage, but a profound disappointment. "You too, my child," he said softly, the words cutting deeper than any blade. I braced for execution, yet it never came. Instead, Caesar rose, approached me, and placed his hand upon my shoulder. The tent fell silent. My former mentor, now my conqueror, offered not punishment but pardon. I struggled to meet his eyes, shame burning through me more fiercely than any fear of death had done. In the days that followed, I witnessed Caesar's calculated mercy. Former enemies became allies, pardoned with theatrical generosity. Some called it wisdom, others manipulation. I watched men who had cursed his name now compete for his favor, and I accepted his forgiveness with gratitude that slowly curdled into something else, something I dared not name even in these private pages. By 46 BCE, Caesar had elevated me to praetor, a position I had not earned through loyalty. Each morning I donned the robes of office, feeling their weight like chains rather than honors. My colleagues, men who had never wavered in their support, watched with barely concealed resentment. I administered justice in Caesar's name while questioning what justice truly meant in this new Rome he was crafting. I owed Caesar my life, my position, my future. This debt hung over me like Damocles' sword. At night, I would recall my father's stories of the Republic before such men as Caesar. Each new title he acquired, each new power granted, tightened something within my chest. His genius was undeniable, his vision for Rome perhaps even noble, but the methods, the concentration of power in one man's hands. His mercy had become my prison. With each passing month, as Caesar's power grew more absolute, my gratitude twisted into something darker. I watched him refuse the crown with one hand while grasping at immortality with the other. The senators, once proud men, now scurried like mice in his presence. Was this the republic my ancestors had bled for? And what was I becoming in this new world, a principled man or merely an ungrateful one? The messenger arrived at dawn, his face grave with news I somehow already knew in my heart. My uncle Cato was dead by his own hand at Utica. I dismissed everyone from my chambers and sat alone, the letter trembling in my fingers. Cato, that pillar of virtue, that last true Roman gone. Not in glorious battle, but by choice. He had chosen death over Caesar's clemency, freedom over subjugation. They told me how it happened. The details carved themselves into my memory. After reading Plato's discourse on the immortality of the soul, he asked for his sword. When it was denied him, Cato tore at his own healing wounds with bare hands, pulling his entrails forth rather than live another day under Caesar's rule. When they found him and tried to save him, he pushed away the physician and tore the stitches with his fingers. I wept that night as I had not since childhood. Not quiet tears of dignity, but racking sobs that shook my frame. Cato was more than my uncle. He was the embodiment of the Republic itself. In the days that followed, I took up my stylus and composed a eulogy that poured from my heart. I praised his virtue, his steadfastness, his refusal to bend. My words honored him as the last true Roman. Word reached me that Caesar was displeased with my eulogy. He wrote his own treatise, Anti-Cato, to diminish my uncle's memory. Yet even as Rome's new master sought to rewrite history, I knew the truth. Cato's death marked not just the passing of a man, but the death of an era. The old virtues, honor, liberty, self-governance, had torn their own wounds open rather than submit to tyranny. I found myself trapped between worlds, having accepted Caesar's pardon while admiring Cato's refusal to do the same. Was my uncle's death noble or merely futile? Was my pragmatism wisdom or weakness? Each night these questions haunted me. I had chosen to live and serve Rome under its new master, while Cato had chosen to die with the republic he loved. Which of us had chosen correctly? Perhaps this was Cato's final lesson, that principles without compromise lead to destruction, yet compromise without principles leads to slavery. As weeks passed, I felt the weight of inheritance settling upon me. Not of property or wealth, but of spirit. I was now the living heir to Cato's ideals in a world that had rejected them. The torch of the old republic had been thrust into my unwilling hands, and I knew not whether to nurture its flame or let it die. I sat in judgment today as urban praetor, while Caesar was away in Gaul again. The marble seat felt cold beneath me as I listened to a property dispute between two merchants. One claimed the other had encroached upon his land when building a new storehouse. I ruled according to the ancient principles of boundary law, as my ancestors had have done. Yet I felt Caesar's shadow over the proceedings, though he was leagues away. The cases grew more complex as Caesar's reforms took hold. Today I adjudicated a citizenship claim from a Gaulish merchant granted rights by Caesar's decree. The old senators glared from the back of the court. I upheld the law as written, though my stomach churned. Later, I walked past the forum where Caesar's new construction projects had torn open the heart of Rome like a wound that would heal into something unrecognizable. The calendar itself has changed under Caesar's command. I found myself explaining to litigants that court dates had shifted due to the new Julian reckoning. 10 days added to realign with the sun's true path, Caesar said. Even time itself bends to his will. In the evening, I dined with 3 new senators, former centurions from Caesar's legions who know nothing of our traditions. They spoke of Caesar as if he were Apollo himself. I presided over 7 cases today, including a dispute involving one of Caesar's building contractors. The man expected special treatment, mentioning his connection to the dictator twice. I ruled against him when the evidence demanded it. As I left the basilica, I wondered if my judgment would reach Caesar's ears. The title dictator once meant 6 months of emergency power. Now it stretches indefinitely, like a shadow at sunset. Word arrived today. Caesar has been named Dictator Perpetuo, dictator for life. I kept my face still as marble when I heard the news in the Senate. My ancestor drove out the last king, yet here I sit, administering justice in a Rome that bows to a crown in all but name. Tonight I read Cato's writings by lamplight, his words on liberty burning brighter than the flame. My hands trembled as I rolled the scroll closed. Cassius approached me after court proceedings today. He spoke quietly of Rome's fading liberty while watching for eavesdroppers. "What would your ancestor think of Rome now?" he asked. His eyes held mine, searching. Others have begun to visit my home at night, men of good family with troubled hearts. We speak of the Republic, of duty, of oaths to Rome above any man. I listen more than I speak, but my silence is not disagreement. The whispers began in the shadows of the Forum. It was early 44 BCE and Rome felt different, tense, expectant. Cassius approached me first, his eyes darting about as we walked under the colonnades. "Caesar no longer acts as consul, but as king," he murmured. His words hung between us like a drawn blade. My brother-in-law had always been passionate, but that day his voice carried something new. Resolve. I dismissed him at first. Caesar had been good to me, sparing my life after Pharsalus despite my fighting with Pompey. Yet Cassius persisted, arranging meetings in quiet villas outside Rome. Others joined: Casca, Cinna, Trebonius, men of reputation and honor. We spoke in coded phrases. Rome's health meant the Republic. The fever was Caesar's ambition. I listened, troubled but unconvinced. Then I witnessed it myself. The Senate rose when Caesar entered, and he remained seated as if we were courtiers, not his equals. He accepted titles beyond measure: Dictator Perpetuo, father of the country. When Mark Antony offered him a crown during the Lupercalia, he refused it theatrically, but his eyes betrayed his desire. The Republic was dying before us. Still, I hesitated. Then came the messages, notes left at the base of my ancestor's statue, the first Brutus who had driven out the kings. "Brutus, are you asleep?" one read. Another, "Your ancestor would act." Graffiti appeared near my home. If only Brutus were alive today. They knew my weakness, my family's legacy of defending Roman liberty. The weight of my name pressed upon me. Cassius knew how to persuade me. "It is not that we hate Caesar," he said during our final secret meeting, "but that we love Rome more." I looked around at the conspirators, 20 in all. Men of principle. They spoke not of personal gain, but of duty to the Republic. My resistance crumbled as I realized what Caesar's ambition truly meant for our traditions, our laws. I made my decision that night, alone in my study, my ancestors' writings before me. I would join them, not out of hatred for Caesar, whom I truly loved, but out of greater love for Rome. The choice tore at my heart. I wrote nothing of our plans, burned all messages, and prepared myself for what was to come. The Ides of March approached, and with it, my most terrible duty. I stood before his statue in the Capitol, my namesake and ancestor, Lucius Junius Brutus. His stern marble face seemed to judge me, the man who had expelled the last king and founded our republic. I traced the inscription with my fingertips, feeling the weight of 5 centuries pressing down upon my shoulders. How could I bear such a name in these troubled times without honoring its legacy? For weeks I retreated to my study, poring over histories of my ancestors' deeds. I read Cato's accounts of tyrannicide and Cicero's treatises on just governance until my eyes burned. By lamplight, I sought answers in ancient texts, justification for the thoughts that increasingly possessed me. Was it my duty to act as he had done when I saw liberty threatened once more? Cassius knew exactly how to ensnare me. "Your ancestor freed Rome from kings," he whispered in the forum. "What would he think of you now?" Others left messages beneath my ancestor's statue. "Are you truly Brutus?" And "Your forefather calls." They wielded my name like a weapon against me, knowing I could not escape its obligations. Each night I wrestled with my conscience. Caesar had shown me nothing but favor, adopted me as a son, elevated me to praetor. Yet when I closed my eyes, I saw the Republic crumbling, its foundations eroded by his ambition. I heard my ancestor's voice demanding I choose between personal loyalty and the liberty of Rome. No man should sleep peacefully with such torment. I visited the capital again, this time at dawn when no others were present. I stood before my ancestor and finally understood. My very name was not merely an inheritance, but a commission. To be Brutus in Rome meant something immutable, a sacred trust passed through centuries. The Republic had been purchased with royal blood before. Would its preservation demand the same price again? That evening, I sent word to Cassius that I would join them. The decision brought no peace, only certainty. I was no longer merely Marcus Junius Brutus the man, but the inheritor of a sacred duty. If saving Rome from tyranny would cost me my friend, my benefactor, and perhaps my soul, then history demanded I pay that price. My ancestor had not flinched. Neither would I. Cassius and I moved with utmost caution as we began identifying potential allies. We needed men of principle, courage, and discretion. Each name was debated extensively. I insisted we approach only those whose commitment to the Republic was beyond question. Our first meetings were held in my garden, secluded from servants' ears. The weight of what we planned hung heavy in the air as we spoke in hushed tones about Rome's future. Casca was among the first we approached. His bitter humor masked a deep resentment toward Caesar's growing power. We met him at the Temple of Jupiter during a quiet afternoon. His eyes widened at our proposition, but he nodded firmly. "I have seen enough," he whispered. Trebonius joined next, bringing strategic thinking. Each new member was sworn to secrecy through solemn oaths to our ancestors and Rome herself. Recruiting Decimus proved most crucial. As Caesar's trusted friend, his inclusion would give us proximity to our target. I invited him to dine at my home, where Cassius and I carefully tested his sentiments. When he revealed his own concerns about Caesar's ambitions, I felt a surge of hope. "The Republic must endure beyond any one man," Decimus said, and I knew then he would join us. His commitment sealed our path forward. We established strict protocols for our meetings. Never more than 3 conspirators would gather in public. We rotated between our homes, the gardens of Pompey, and secluded temple grounds. Messages were delivered only by trusted freedmen, never written. Simba proved invaluable in this regard, his network of loyal clients carrying verbal communications across Rome. I slept little, constantly evaluating who might betray us, who might falter. Some we deliberately excluded. Cicero, despite his republican principles, was deemed too cautious, too prone to indecision. Antony's loyalty to Caesar was unshakable. We would have to neutralize him during the act itself. Others were rejected for loose tongues or questionable motives. I insisted our cause remain pure. We would not admit those driven merely by personal grievance or ambition. This was for Rome, not for ourselves. By mid-March, our numbers had grown to nearly 60 men, senators and equities united in purpose. I worried such a large group increased our risk of discovery, yet the breadth of support reassured me of our cause's righteousness. Our final meeting was held in fragments, small groups arriving at different times to my villa outside Rome. As I looked upon these men, I saw the future of the Republic in their resolute faces. The Ides approached, There would be no turning back. The days of debate in early March were endless. We gathered in secret, voices hushed as we argued over the perfect location. Cassius favored the Via Sacra, where Caesar often walked. Casca suggested the Flaminian Circus during games. I listened, weighing each option carefully. The risk of public chaos troubled me deeply. We needed a controlled environment, somewhere dignified yet confined. Ultimately, we settled on the Senate meeting at Pompey's Theatre on the Ides of March. The symbolism was perfect. Caesar would fall at the foot of Pompey's statue. The curved chamber would trap him, with no guards allowed inside. Each conspirator's position was meticulously planned. Casca would deliver the first strike from behind, while Cassius would approach from the left. My role was crucial. I would present a petition for my exiled brother-in-law, drawing Caesar's attention while others moved into position. Trebonius would detain Mark Antony outside the chamber. I had insisted we spare Antony despite Cassius's objections. "We are surgeons removing a cancer," I told them, "not butchers starting a slaughter." Some nodded, others remained unconvinced. We prepared contingencies for every scenario. If Caesar didn't attend, Decimus Brutus would personally escort him. If fighting erupted, Cinna and Metellus would block the exits. We arranged signals and countersigns. The daggers were small, easily concealed beneath our togas. Mine felt impossibly heavy when I tested its weight. This was not murder, I reminded myself, but tyrannicide, a sacred duty to Rome. As the day approached, sleep abandoned me. I paced my study each night, reciting Cato's speeches on liberty. My wife Portia suspected something. Her eyes followed me with growing concern. When she deliberately cut herself to prove her strength, I finally confided in her. Her courage shamed me. "You carry Rome's future," she whispered, pressing a hand to my cheek. The night before the Ides, I wrote letters to be opened should I not survive. To my son, my philosophy. To Cicero, my justification. I cleaned my dagger and placed it beside my bed. Strange calm settled over me as I realized tomorrow would bring either Rome's rebirth or my death. Perhaps both. The fates would decide. I was merely their instrument, the reluctant hand of destiny. Portia had been watching me with those perceptive eyes for days. My sleepless nights and hushed conversations with Cassius had not escaped her notice. Last night she confronted me in our bedchamber, her voice trembling yet resolute. "You carry a burden, husband. Your mind wanders when we speak, and you start at shadows. What conspiracy steals your peace?" I denied it at first, claiming Senate matters weighed on me, but Portia would not be dismissed. To my astonishment, she drew a small dagger and cut deep into her own thigh. Blood trickled down her leg as she stood unflinching. "I am Cato's daughter," she declared. "If I cannot be trusted with your thoughts, at least know I can endure pain without betraying secrets." Her courage broke my resolve. I took her wounded leg in my hands and bound it with linen, tears welling in my eyes. How could I keep secrets from this woman who had proven herself more Roman than many men in the Senate? As the night deepened, I whispered the truth. Caesar's ambition, our republic in peril, the conspiracy forming to save Rome from tyranny. Portia listened without interruption, her face pale but composed. When I finished, she took my hands in hers. "You act as my father would have," she whispered. Her father, Cato, that paragon of republican virtue, had died rather than live under Caesar's rule. I saw in her eyes both fear for my safety and fierce pride in my principles. She was truly her father's daughter. "When?" she asked simply. Not if or should you, just when. I told her of our plans for the Ides. She nodded, then surprised me by offering practical counsel on which senators might still be swayed to our cause. Her political acumen matched her courage. That night, our marriage transformed. We were now true conspirators, bound by dangerous knowledge as much as by our vows. As dawn approached, I felt both relieved and terrified. The comfort of sharing my burden with Portia was immeasurable. No longer did I walk alone in darkness. Yet now I feared for her as well as myself. If our plot failed, she too would face execution. I watched her finally sleeping, her breathing steady despite her wounded leg, and wondered had I been selfish in my confession. Sleep eluded me that final night. The Ides approached with the inevitability of dawn, and my mind churned with every detail of our plan. I paced my chamber, reviewing each conspirator's position, each moment's choreography. The weight of tomorrow pressed upon my chest. I had studied the Senate's layout countless times, yet found myself sketching it again by lamplight, marking Caesar's seat with a heavy hand. We gathered one final time at Cassius's villa, voices hushed despite the privacy. 23 men bound by purpose, exchanging solemn nods where once there had been debate. "For the Republic," we whispered, clasping arms. Casca's hand trembled slightly. Cassius's eyes burned with certainty. I wondered if my own betrayed the war within me. As we dispersed into the night, each man alone with his thoughts, I felt the cold finality of our course. Rome herself seemed restless that night. Citizens reported strange lights dancing above the Capitol, owls shrieking in the Forum at midday. A servant swore the doors to my study had opened of their own accord. I dismissed these tales as I always had, mere superstition unworthy of a follower of Stoic philosophy. Yet each new omen reported sent a chill through me that reason could not warm. Memories of Caesar haunted me as midnight passed. I recalled his hand on my shoulder after Pharsalus, sparing my life when he might have taken it. His letters from Gaul, always addressing me as my son. The pride in his eyes when I spoke in the Senate. Had he truly become a threat to Rome, or had we convinced ourselves of this to justify what we planned? My heart ached with the contradiction of loving the man I must destroy. Portia found me before dawn, her eyes red-rimmed from sleeplessness. She asked no questions but took my hands in hers, her fingers tracing the calluses formed by years of swordplay. "Remember who you are," she whispered, her voice steady despite her fear. My brave Portia, who had proven her worth by wounding her own thigh rather than be excluded from my confidence. I kissed her brow, wondering if I would return to her a hero or a villain. As the first light broke, I prepared my toga with unusual care. The dagger, newly sharpened, I concealed within its folds. I stood before the household shrine and offered no prayer. The gods must choose their own side today. May Rome forgive us if we are wrong, I murmured to the empty room, and may history understand if we are right. I stepped into the street, toward the Senate, toward Caesar, toward a deed that would echo through the ages. Dawn broke with unusual clarity that day, the Ides of March. I rose earlier than was my custom, my mind sharp despite the restless night. The weight of what was to come pressed upon me as I performed my morning ablutions with mechanical precision. I splashed cold water on my face, feeling each droplet as it ran down my skin. The familiar routine seemed foreign now, each mundane act magnified by the knowledge of what the day would bring. Portia knew. Though I had not spoken of our plans, my wife's perception cut through my practiced composure. As I prepared to leave, she clasped my hand with unexpected strength. "Remember who you are," she whispered, her eyes holding mine. I kissed her brow and turned away quickly, fearing my resolve might waver. She was Cato's daughter, and in that moment showed more steel than many men I had known in battle. The streets of Rome teemed with life, oblivious to the transformation about to occur. Merchants arranged their wares, children darted between pedestrians, and the smell of baking bread filled the morning air. I walked deliberately, noting each familiar landmark as if seeing it anew. Near the Forum, I glimpsed Cassius, his lean face composed but his eyes alert. We exchanged the briefest of nods, nothing that would arouse suspicion. Word reached us that Caesar might not attend. Calpurnia, plagued by nightmares, had begged him to remain home. The omens, too, were unfavorable. A sacrifice had revealed an animal without a heart, the augurs said. My pulse quickened with anxiety. After months of planning, would fate intervene? I maintained my outward calm, but exchanged meaningful glances with Trebonius. Everything hinged on Caesar's presence in the Senate that day. Decimus proved his worth then. While we waited with mounting tension, he went directly to Caesar's home. I later learned how skillfully he had played his part, mocking the dictator's fears and appealing to his pride. "What will the people say if you heed a woman's dreams?" he had challenged. Caesar, ever mindful of his dignity, relented. When a messenger arrived confirming Caesar was en route, I felt the weight of history descend upon my shoulders. I entered the theater of Pompey with measured steps, the familiar Senate chamber now transformed into the stage for our desperate act. My eyes were drawn to the statue of Pompey himself, standing in silent judgment. How fitting that Caesar would fall at the feet of the great rival he had defeated. I took my position among my fellow senators, exchanging imperceptible signals with the conspirators. Our daggers remained hidden beneath our togas. We were ready, and then came the cry from outside, "Caesar approaches!" Caesar entered the Senate that fateful day with his head held high, draped in his purple-bordered toga. I watched him closely, his confident stride the slight nod to senators who greeted him. He seemed oblivious to what awaited. We conspirators exchanged knowing glances, each taking our positions as planned. My heart pounded in my chest, yet my face remained a mask of calm. Tilius Cimber approached Caesar first, pleading for his brother's return from exile. As planned, we gathered closer, appearing to support his petition. Caesar waved dismissively, irritated by our persistence. The signal came. Cimber pulled down Caesar's toga from his shoulder. I saw confusion flash across Caesar's face, quickly turning to alarm as Casca struck the first blow, though his hand trembled and the strike landed poorly. "What is the meaning of this violence?" Caesar cried out, grappling with Casca's arm. Then we all drew our daggers. The Senate erupted in chaos, men shouting, scrambling to flee. Caesar spun from one attacker to another, his eyes wide with disbelief. He fought like a cornered animal, until he saw me approach with my blade drawn. His resistance faltered, his expression one of profound betrayal. "You too, my child," he whispered in Greek as our eyes met. The words pierced deeper than any blade could. I hesitated only a moment before thrusting my dagger forward. "Thus always to tyrants," I managed to say, though I scarcely recognized my own voice. It sounded distant, as if spoken by someone else. I watched my hand move as if it belonged to another man. Caesar pulled his toga over his face with dignity, no longer resisting. He stumbled backward against Pompey's statue, where he collapsed after receiving 23 wounds. The marble floor pooled with blood, his blood on our hands, on our robes. In that moment of silence after the frenzy, I stared at the still form of the man who had been like a father to me, now lying broken at the foot of his old rival's monument. The Senate emptied in panic, leaving only us conspirators standing with our bloody weapons. We looked at one another, uncertain in our triumph. Someone suggested we address the people immediately. I nodded mechanically, dipping my hands in Caesar's blood as we had planned. Yet as we prepared to proclaim Rome's liberation, I felt strangely hollow. We had killed Caesar, but in that moment I wondered what else had died with him. Blood still dripped from our daggers as we marched to the Capitol. "Liberty is restored," I shouted, my voice hoarse with emotion. The Forum erupted in chaos. Some citizens cheered wildly, raising fists to the heavens and embracing one another. Others stood frozen in horror, hands covering their mouths. I had expected universal jubilation, but the divided reaction unsettled me. Still, I believed once they understood our noble purpose, all of Rome would celebrate. I addressed the gathering crowd from the Capitol steps, my heart pounding beneath my toga. "Romans, we have freed you from tyranny," I proclaimed. "Caesar would have made himself king, destroying everything our ancestors built." Some nodded vigorously, while others wept openly. An old veteran spat at my feet. This was not the reception I had imagined in all our planning. Doubt flickered within me, but I silenced it. The people simply needed time to understand the necessity of our actions. Antony arrived under guard, his face unreadable. "We spared you," I told him, "to show we oppose tyranny, not Caesar personally." He bowed his head respectfully, agreeing to address the Senate the next day about peaceful transition. Cassius whispered warnings in my ear, but I dismissed them. Antony was a practical man who surely understood our cause. How foolish I was. His calm demeanor masked a calculating mind already plotting our destruction. We worked feverishly through the afternoon, dispatching messengers to our allies across Italy. Casca secured the treasury, while Simba organized guards at city gates. I drafted proclamations explaining our righteous deed, certain they would rally the provinces to our cause. The machinery of government continued turning despite its master's death. I felt a surge of pride. We had excised the cancer without killing the patient. The Republic would live again, stronger than before. As dusk fell, troubling reports arrived. Caesar's veterans were gathering near the field of Mars, their faces grim. Common citizens had begun leaving flowers at the spot where he fell. "They mourn him as if he were their father," muttered Cassius incredulously. I had not anticipated this depth of devotion to the man we called tyrant. Had we misread the public mood so completely? No, I reassured myself. They simply needed guidance to see the truth of our noble cause. I retired to my chambers that night, unable to sleep. Through my window, I heard not the celebratory songs of liberty I had imagined, but angry murmurs and occasional wails of grief. My wife, Portia, took my hand, her eyes questioning what I could not answer. The Republic was free, yet the people mourned. Something fundamental had shifted in Rome that I had failed to perceive. As I finally drifted into uneasy slumber, I wondered if our daggers had struck more than just Caesar's flesh. I was a fool to trust Antony. In those first hours after Caesar's death, he came to us with seeming deference, clasping our bloodied hands and speaking of reconciliation. He requested only to read Caesar's will and arrange a proper funeral. Cassius warned me, his eyes sharp with suspicion, but I saw an opportunity for unity. Let Rome heal, I told my fellow conspirators. Let us show we killed a tyrant, not the Republic. While we deliberated, Antony moved with serpent's cunning. He secured Caesar's papers and treasury, positioning himself as executor of the dictator's will. Then he dined with Cassius, all smiles and promises. He plays us for fools, Cassius hissed afterward. But I believed Rome needed healing words, not more bloodshed. When Antony requested to speak at Caesar's funeral after me, I granted it despite Cassius's vehement objections. At the forum, I spoke first to the assembled citizens. I explained our actions with careful reason, how Caesar's ambition threatened our ancient liberties, how we acted not from hatred, but love of Rome. The crowd listened in respectful silence. Some even nodded. I believed then that they understood, that they would embrace the restored Republic. I stepped aside, satisfied, as Antony approached the rostrum with Caesar's body. Friends, Romans, countrymen. Antony began softly, displaying Caesar's bloodied toga. With each, Brutus is an honorable man. His tone shifted imperceptibly. He read Caesar's will, revealing gifts to every citizen. He showed Caesar's wounds, naming each conspirator who delivered them. The crowd's mood transformed before my eyes, from somber attention to restless murmuring to outright rage. Antony had turned them against us without ever directly condemning our act. By evening, Rome was in chaos. The mob surged through streets with torches, hunting us. "They're burning our houses," Casca reported, breathless from running. Cinna the poet was torn apart, merely for sharing a name with one of us. I watched from a rooftop hideaway as smoke rose from my own home. My principles, my belief in Roman reason, had blinded me to Antony's ruthless political genius. We fled that night, disguised as merchants. "You gave him the means to destroy us," Cassius said bitterly as we passed through the city gates. I had no answer. My idealism had been our undoing. Antony now controlled Rome, with Octavian soon to join him. We would need to raise armies in the provinces if the Republic was to have any chance. The irony was not lost on me. To save Rome from a tyrant, we might need to make war against her. I fled Rome under cover of darkness, the cheers that once greeted me now replaced by angry mobs calling for my blood. How quickly they turned. The same citizens who nodded approvingly at Caesar's death now hunted us like criminals. Cassius and I separated, safer that way. I wrapped myself in a commoner's cloak, my face hidden as I passed through the city gates, every shadow seeming to harbor an assassin loyal to Antony. Loyal freedmen guided me south toward my estates. We traveled by night, rested in sympathizers' homes by day. One evening we narrowly escaped a patrol of Antony's men. I heard their horses and ducked into a roadside shrine. They passed within arm's reach, speaking of rewards for my capture. I left offerings at that shrine the next morning, thanking whatever god still favored the Republic's defenders. My villa in Campania offered temporary refuge, though I dared not stay long. I received letters from Cicero, who wrote that Antony spoke against us daily in the Forum. My heart ached for Portia, alone in Rome, facing scorn for my deeds. She wrote bravely, but I sensed her fear. The republic we sought to restore slipped further away with each passing day. I gathered what resources I could: coin, loyal servants, information. Each day brought news worse than the last. Caesar's veterans flocked to Antony's side. More disturbing was word of young Octavian arriving to claim his inheritance. Caesar's adopted son, barely 18, yet commanders spoke his name with growing respect. The boy I had barely noticed now threatened to become my nemesis. How had our noble deed gone so wrong? We removed a tyrant only to birth chaos. I paced my gardens at night, questioning every decision. Had we been blinded by ideals? Caesar's ghost seemed to mock me from every corner. I, who had studied philosophy, now found no wisdom to comfort me. The liberator had become the hunted, the savior now condemned as traitor. Reports arrived that Antony and Octavian were forming an alliance. Italy was no longer safe. I made my decision. I would sail east to gather forces. Perhaps in Greece or Macedonia, where Caesar's influence had been less absolute, I might find support. As our ship pulled away from the Italian shore, I watched my homeland fade into darkness, wondering if I would ever see Rome again. Athens welcomed me like an old friend. As my ship docked, memories flooded back of my student days, when philosophy, not war, consumed my thoughts. The Acropolis stood proud against the sky, a reminder of democracy's birthplace. I walked the same paths I had as a youth, now with the weight of Rome's future upon my shoulders. Strange how life's currents had carried me back here, not as a scholar, but as an exile seeking power. Macedonia proved more welcoming than I dared hope. The governor, recognizing my authority as praetor, surrendered control without resistance. The legions stationed there. Caesar's veterans, ironically, pledged loyalty to me with surprising enthusiasm. Each day brought new allies. Each night found me poring over maps and tallying resources. I, who had never sought military command, now found myself inspecting troops and planning defenses. Gold flowed into our coffers from cities eager to curry favor. I imposed contributions on wealthy provinces, justifying each demand as necessary for the Republic's salvation. The war chest grew heavier, my conscience lighter. Each night I wrote letters to Rome, to allies still hiding there, assuring them our cause remained just. Yet, in private moments, I questioned whether extortion in liberty's name was any better than Caesar's tyranny. Cassius arrived with news of his success in Syria. We embraced as brothers in both blood and cause. His eyes burned with a fervor I recognized, the same that had driven us to the Ides of March. Together, We controlled vast territories, commanding more legions than we had ever imagined. Our correspondence with other Republican leaders grew bolder. No longer were we fugitives. We were becoming warlords with the strength to challenge Rome itself. Reports from Rome grew darker. Antony and Octavian, once enemies, now united against us. They had declared us public enemies, confiscated our properties, and hunted our families. The Senate, that venerable institution we had shed blood to preserve, now danced to their tune. It became clear we would need to fight not just for our lives, but for the very idea of Rome. The Republic would be reborn through fire and sword. The irony was not lost on me. I, who had struck down Caesar to prevent one-man rule, now commanded armies without election, governed provinces without Senate approval, and collected taxes without legal authority. Had we truly preserved Republican values or merely changed who wielded power? As I reviewed my troops at sunset, I wondered if history would remember us as liberators or as the men who dealt the final blow to the Republic we so loved. Athens embraced me as a liberator, erecting statues in my honor alongside their ancient heroes. I found it ironic, being celebrated while desperately building an army to face Antony's forces. Each morning I reviewed recruitment tallies. Each evening I studied military texts. The philosopher had become a general, though I lacked any natural aptitude for it. Necessity, that cruel teacher, forced my hand. I commandeered provincial tax revenues without hesitation. The treasury at Patara yielded 16,000 talents, a fortune that bought loyalty from legionaries and supplies from reluctant cities. I told myself these were loans to the Republic, not theft. Each requisition order I signed felt like a betrayal of principle. Yet I continued. How quickly one becomes what one despises when survival demands it. Veterans like Lucius Cestius proved invaluable, teaching me what no book could. Soldiers follow their stomachs first, their hearts second, he counseled as we inspected grain stores. I learned to drill troops, to recognize when discipline waned, to speak the language of men who lived by the sword. My hands, once ink-stained from writing philosophy, now calloused from riding and weapons practice. Cassius and I exchanged letters weekly, coordinating our growing forces across the east. His successes in Syria bolstered our position. 12 legions between us by summer's end. "We are becoming warlords," I wrote to him once, "though we claim to fight for the Republic." His reply was characteristically blunt. "Better temporary warlords than permanent slaves to tyrants." I wondered if history would make such distinctions. I convened what Senate I could, a shadow government of exiled nobles who gathered in Rhodes. We passed resolutions and issued decrees as if our authority remained intact. The performance felt hollow, yet necessary. Legitimacy comes from adherence to law, I reminded those who suggested abandoning such pretenses. Meanwhile, I ordered cities to provision my troops without senatorial approval. The contradiction wasn't lost on me. The news from Rome arrived like a physical blow. Antony, Octavian, and Lepidus had formed their triumvirate, dividing the Republic among themselves like common thieves. Worse, they had begun proscriptions, hundreds of names on death lists, including dear Cicero. I wept that night, alone in my tent. My army now seemed too small, our cause perhaps already lost. Yet retreat was impossible. We had crossed our Rubicon months ago. News reached me today that turned my blood to ice. The triumvirate, Octavian, Antony, and Lepidus, have posted proscription lists throughout Rome. Hundreds of names, citizens marked for death without trial, their property seized, their families denied even the dignity of funeral rites. I paced my tent through the night, letters from Rome scattered across my table, each bearing more horrific details than the last. Then came the darkest news. Cicero's name was among them. Cicero, Rome's greatest voice, my mentor, hunted down like an animal while attempting to flee Italy. The messenger could barely speak as he described how the assassins caught him near his villa. They took his head and hands, the head that conceived such eloquence, the hands that wrote wisdom for the ages, and displayed them upon the rostra in the Forum. I wept for the first time since leaving Rome, not quiet tears, but great heaving sobs that emptied my lungs and left me gasping. The details were too much to bear. Antony's wife, Fulvia, taking Cicero's severed head upon her lap, pulling out its tongue and piercing it repeatedly with her hairpins in grotesque revenge for his philippics against her husband. Such desecration reveals the true nature of those who now rule Rome. Each day brings more refugees to our camp, senators, equites, even ordinary citizens who escaped with nothing but their lives. They bring accounts of Rome transformed into a slaughterhouse. Men cut down in the streets, in their homes, at dinner tables. The Forum awash with blood. 3,000 names and counting. These are not acts of governance, but of monsters who have abandoned all pretense of law or tradition. Any thought of reconciliation died with Cicero. This is no longer a political dispute, but a battle for Rome's soul. I gathered my officers last night and spoke plainly. We fight not just for the Republic, but for civilization itself, against men who would turn Rome into a charnel house to satisfy their greed and vengeance. Their eyes hardened as I spoke. They too had received letters, lost friends, family. I have written to Cassius, urging him to accelerate our plans. We must unite our forces sooner than intended. Tonight, I took Cicero's last letter to me and placed it with my father's dagger, the one he used against himself rather than live under tyranny. I swear by all the gods of Rome, by the shade of Cicero himself, the triumvirs will answer for their butchery. The Republic will have justice, or I will join my father in death. The messenger arrived at dawn, his face ashen. I knew before he spoke. Your wife, Portia. The words that followed shattered my world. Portia, my beloved, had taken her own life. In her desperation and fear for my fate, she had swallowed hot coals. The agony of her final moments haunted me instantly. How could she believe I had fallen when I still stood, fighting for the Republic we both cherished? They told me she had grown increasingly anxious in my absence. Rome whispered of our defeat, though no battle had yet been decided. Portia, ever loyal to our cause, could not bear the thought of life under tyranny. The false news of my death became her truth, and in her anguish she chose a Roman's death, painful and deliberate. I had left her to face Rome's chaos alone, a decision that now crushed my heart. I remembered Portia as I had last seen her, proud and resolute despite her fears. She had proven her strength years before, cutting her thigh to show she could bear pain worthy of Cato's daughter and Brutus's wife. Her mind matched any senator's, her counsel always wise. She alone understood why Caesar had to fall, why Rome's liberty outweighed personal loyalty. Now that brilliant flame was extinguished. I hid my grief from my men. They could not see their leader broken when battle approached. By day I reviewed strategies and inspired courage. By night, alone in my tent, I surrendered to sorrow. I wrote letters to her that would never be sent, explaining my choices, begging forgiveness for leaving her behind. My pillow knew tears that Rome would never witness. Portia deserved a husband who chose her over the Republic. The men spoke of wives and sweethearts waiting in Rome, futures to build after victory. I remained silent. What future remained for me? Portia had been my anchor to humanity, the gentle hand that pulled me back from cold philosophy. In her arms, I was simply a man, not Rome's savior or Caesar's murderer. Without her, the cause felt hollow, a principle without heart. Yet I continued, for to falter would make her sacrifice meaningless. Each night I gazed at the stars, wondering if Portia's spirit watched from above. Had I honored or betrayed her by placing Rome first? The Republic might yet be saved, but my heart was already lost. Even victory would bring no joy, for I had no home to return to. The Rome I had known died with her. All that remained was duty, cold companion to a man who once knew love's warmth. Portia had severed my last tie to life beyond the cause. Last night in my tent at Sardis, something occurred that I hesitate to commit even to these private pages. As I pored over my scrolls by lamplight, the flame suddenly guttered. The air grew cold despite the summer heat. Looking up from Plato's words, I beheld a dark figure standing silent at the entrance of my tent, indistinct yet undeniably present. My rational mind insisted it was mere shadow, yet my heart raced with primal fear. "Who are you that enters unbidden?" I demanded, reaching for my dagger. The figure spoke not, yet somehow conveyed its message clearly to my mind. "I am your evil genius, Brutus," it seemed to say. "We shall meet again at Philippi." Then, as if blown away by a sudden wind, it vanished. I rushed outside, but found only my puzzled guards who swore none had entered. Was this Caesar's ghost come for vengeance, or merely exhaustion playing tricks upon my mind? I told no one of my visitation, but other ill omens soon plagued our camp. The eagles, Jupiter's sacred birds that adorn our standards, were seen flying away rather than toward battle. A swarm of bees, harbingers of ill fortune, formed a buzzing cloud over the officers' tents. Cassius reported that during sacrifice, the animal's entrails showed signs that even the most optimistic haruspex could not interpret favorably. The men whispered of curses and divine disfavor. "Pay these signs no heed," I announced to my officers the next morning. "We make our own fate through courage and virtue." They nodded, seemingly reassured, though doubt lingered in their eyes. Privately, I was less certain. I have long dismissed superstition as the refuge of weak minds, yet now found myself recalling the warnings of the soothsayer who bid Caesar beware the Ides of March. Had I not dismissed those warnings too? What if these omens spoke truth? That night, I returned to my philosophical texts, seeking wisdom from Stoic teachings. "Fear of death is irrational," I read from Seneca, "for death ends all suffering." Cold comfort indeed. I found myself unable to concentrate, the spectre's words echoing, "We shall meet again at Philippi." I have faced death many times without trembling. Why then did this promise of meeting fill me with such dread? Perhaps because for the first time I sensed fate's hand closing around my throat. At dawn, I made my decision. "We march for Philippi immediately," I ordered Cassius, who raised an eyebrow but did not question me. If doom awaited me there, I would meet it standing, sword in hand. The Republic deserves no less. As our legions began breaking camp, I cast one final glance at the horizon. The rising sun painted the clouds blood red. Fitting, I thought. If the gods have written my end, let it be with honor, not cowering from shadows and whispers. Cassius and I disagreed bitterly on our approach to the coming battle. He favored patience, a strategy of delay that would strain the triumvir's supply lines while we held the high ground. "Let hunger and disease do our work," he argued, his weathered face tense with conviction. "Their men will desert or weaken." His caution came from experience, yet I found myself increasingly restless. Reports from Rome spoke of more executions, more property seized. Time, I felt, was not our ally. My own troops grew eager for confrontation. Each morning as I walked among them, their eyes followed me with expectation. "When do we face them, General?" they would ask. I could not tell them that Cassius and I were divided. Our legions had trained for months. They were ready, their spirits high. The men who had followed us from Rome deserved their chance to fight for the Republic, not waste away in strategic waiting. My military experience paled beside Cassius's, yet my conviction grew stronger. The march to Philippi tested our forces. We traversed rocky paths through Macedonia's mountains, the autumn winds biting through cloaks. I rode alongside the column, watching men struggle with supply carts on steep inclines. Some horses faltered on the treacherous terrain. Each night, fewer fires dotted our camp as provisions dwindled. Yet morale remained high. These hardships forged stronger bonds among our ranks. The men spoke of Rome's liberty as if it were a living thing they carried with them. Our final war council was held in a valley within sight of the enemy camp. Cassius arrived with his maps and reports, his face drawn with fatigue. "Their position is strong," he admitted, "but not impregnable." I argued passionately for immediate action. "Every day we wait, Antony and Octavian grow stronger," I insisted. The other officers shifted uncomfortably as our debate intensified. Finally, Cassius conceded with reluctance. "Very well, Brutus. We attack, but may the gods forgive us if we've chosen poorly." That night, I oversaw our battle preparations. My legions would take the right wing, Cassius the left. We arranged cohorts according to experience, veterans at the front and flanks. Supplies were distributed, weapons sharpened. I visited each unit, speaking words of encouragement. "Tomorrow," I told them, "we fight not for glory, but for Rome's soul." The men responded with solemn determination. Later, alone in my tent, I penned letters to Portia, uncertain if they would ever reach her. Dawn revealed the enemy formations across the plain. Our armies faced each other like great beasts preparing to clash. I donned my armor with ritual care, each piece a weight of responsibility. Standing at the crest of our position, I surveyed what might be Rome's deciding hour. More than our lives hung in the balance. The Republic itself awaited judgment. Cassius approached, his expression unreadable. We clasped arms without speaking. Our disagreements mattered no longer. History would remember only the outcome of this day. Dawn broke over the plains of Philippi as I surveyed our position. The battlefield stretched before us. Marshy ground to the north, rocky hills to the south. I positioned my legions on the right wing, while Cassius commanded the left. Across the field, Antony's forces faced Cassius, while young Octavian's troops opposed mine. The morning air carried the metallic scent of armor and the murmur of thousands of men preparing for death or glory. I gave the signal, and my troops surged forward with disciplined fury. The clash of steel against steel filled the air as we smashed into Octavian's lines. His men wavered, then broke before our onslaught. We pressed our advantage, driving them back step by bloody step. The earth trembled beneath thousands of sandaled feet. Sweat stung my eyes as I led from the front, my sword arm growing heavy with each strike, yet my spirit soared as I saw Octavian's men retreat. Victory seemed within our grasp as we stormed Octavian's camp. His soldiers fled in disarray, abandoning tents and supplies. I ordered men to secure the position while maintaining our momentum. Through the haze of battle, I glimpsed Octavian's litter being carried away, the sickly heir of Caesar, apparently too ill to fight. Had we captured him, the war might have ended that day, but fate had other designs, and my attention was drawn to alarming developments on our left flank. A great cloud of dust obscured the field where Cassius fought against Antony. Only later did I learn the truth. Antony had broken through, driving Cassius back and capturing his camp. The cruel irony was that neither of us could see the other's fortune. While I achieved victory on my wing, Cassius believed all was lost. I dispatched a messenger to inform him of our success, but the man was delayed in the confusion of battle. By the time I reached Cassius's position, it was too late. My dear friend, believing our cause defeated, had ordered his freedman Pindarus to run him through with his own sword. I found his body, still warm, the noble blood of Rome soaking into foreign soil. I wept then, not as a general, but as a man who had lost his brother in arms. The last of the true Romans, I called him, for in Cassius lived the unyielding spirit of the republic we fought to restore. That night, with Cassius gone, the full weight of command fell upon my shoulders alone. I gathered his officers and mine, speaking words of resolve I scarcely believed myself. "We have proven today we can defeat them," I told the men, though my heart was heavy with grief. I ordered Cassius's body prepared with honors, while we consolidated our forces for the coming battle. The enemy would expect us broken. Instead, we would show them the courage of men fighting for liberty. The day after Cassius fell, I walked among our wounded, my sandals caked with mud and blood. His officers watched me with wary eyes, uncertain of their new commander. I had wept for my friend in private, but now wore the stern mask of leadership. "We fight on," I told them, clasping arms with each captain in turn. Some nodded with conviction, others merely lowered their gaze. The weight of 20,000 lives pressed upon my shoulders. Disputes erupted immediately. Cassius's lieutenants questioned my authority, argued over formations, provisions, even burial rites. "Your men retreated first," one accused. I swallowed my anger, remembering how Cassius had managed these proud men. "Today we are not his men or mine," I replied. "We are Rome's last defenders." I assigned mixed units, my veterans alongside Cassius's troops, breaking down the divisions between us. By nightfall, a fragile unity had formed. The dead required attention before strategy. I ordered Cassius's body prepared with the finest oils we possessed. "He shall have a proper Roman funeral," I insisted, though some counseled against the delay. We built his pyre on a hill overlooking our camp, and I placed the coin in his mouth myself. As flames consumed my oldest ally, I whispered promises only he could hear. Antony's forces watched from distant ridges, granting us this moment of respect. Our supply lines hung by threads. Scouts reported Octavian's ships harassing our convoys along the coast. I rationed what remained, half portions for all, including myself. The armory worked through the night repairing shields and forging replacement blades. I interviewed captured centurions from Antony's legions, offering clemency for information. "They expect us to retreat," one revealed. "Antony boasts he'll drive us into the sea by week's end." This at least gave us time. A messenger arrived at dawn, exhausted and bearing the worst news. "Brutus," he gasped, "Dolabella has fallen in Syria. No reinforcements will come." I dismissed my attendants and studied our maps alone. Cassius had counseled patience to starve Antony's larger force of supplies. But now our own provisions dwindled. I traced potential retreat routes with my finger, then slammed my fist upon the table. No, I would not be remembered as the general who fled. I summoned my officers before sunrise. Their faces showed the same exhaustion that plagued me, yet something else burned in their eyes. Determination. "Tomorrow, we offer battle," I announced. "Not because victory is certain, but because retreat is unthinkable." None objected. As they departed to prepare their men, I penned a final letter to Porcia. The quill felt heavy in my hand. I wrote not of strategy or politics, but of love and the republic I had tried to save. I gathered my officers at dawn, the weight of our final stand pressing upon my shoulders. The second battle of Philippi loomed before us like a tempest on the horizon. As I unrolled the maps across the command table, I traced our positions with a steady finger. "Here we make our stand for Rome," I told them. "Here we defend the republic that our ancestors bled to create." Their eyes reflected both fear and resolve, a mirror of my own soul. Later, I addressed the legions, my voice carrying across the silent ranks. "Men of Rome, tomorrow we fight not just for victory, but for liberty itself. I promised generous rewards, land grants and gold, though I wondered if our treasury could fulfill such pledges. Each man who stands with the Republic shall be remembered as its savior." The responding cheer heartened me. Yet I saw in many faces the same question that haunted my nights: was our cause already lost? That evening I summoned my closest friends to my quarters. To Lucilius I gave my signet ring. Should I fall, see that my wife receives my letters. To Strato, my finest dagger, a token of friendship that has never wavered. We spoke not of defeat, yet prepared for it nonetheless. I distributed small keepsakes to each man, a scroll of poetry for one, a silver coin for another. Silent understanding passed between us. These were the gestures of a man setting his affairs in order. In solitude, I penned final instructions for the battle. The right flank would hold firm, while our left would press forward, hoping to break Antony's line. I positioned our strongest cohorts at the center, where I would lead personally. My hand was steady as I wrote, though my mind wandered to Athens, where I had once been merely a student of philosophy. How strange the path that led from Plato's teachings to this battlefield. I had become what necessity demanded, no longer just a thinker, but a warrior. Sleep eluded me that night. As I paced the perimeter of our camp, I felt a familiar chill. The ghost was near, as it had promised at Sardis. "Have you come to witness the end?" I whispered to the darkness. No answer came, yet I sensed its presence, watching, waiting. Strangely, I felt no fear, only a calm acceptance. The stars wheeled overhead, indifferent to our mortal struggles. I had done what I believed right, had acted according to principle rather than ambition. If this was to be my final night, I would meet dawn without regret. Dawn broke with the clarion call of trumpets. I donned my armor methodically, each piece a weight not just on my body, but on my soul. Outside, the legions formed their lines with practiced precision. I mounted my horse and rode to the front, drawing my sword as I took position. Before us lay Antony's forces, eagles gleaming in the morning light. "For the Republic," I said, loud enough only for those nearest to hear. The die was cast. Whatever fate awaited me, I would meet it as a Roman with dignity, with courage, with honor. The plains of Philippi ran red with blood as our forces clashed with Antony's legions. Dawn had barely broken when the battle lines met with a thunderous crash of shields and swords. I led the right wing, driving forward with unexpected fury. For a brief, glorious moment, victory seemed within our grasp. Our men fought with the desperate courage of those who knew the Republic's fate hung in the balance. I felt Caesar's ghost watching as we struggled for Rome's soul. The tide turned with cruel swiftness. Messala's cavalry, overwhelmed by superior numbers, broke and fled. I watched in horror as gaps appeared in our line. Cassius's death the day before had already weakened morale, but still our men fought valiantly. Young Cato fell defending the eagle, his body pierced by a dozen wounds. Labeo rallied the 10th Legion for one final, desperate charge. I joined them, cutting down 3 of Antony's centurions before being forced back. By midday, defeat was certain. Our center collapsed under Octavian's relentless pressure. I gathered what remained of my personal guard and fought our way to the hills east of the battlefield. From that vantage, I watched the Republic die. 20,000 of our men lay dead or captured. The eagles of 4 legions had fallen into enemy hands. My friend Volumnius urged escape to Thrace, where we might raise new forces. But I knew the cause was lost. Night fell as we made camp in the hills. The few hundred men who remained with me built no fires, knowing enemy scouts searched for us. I gathered my closest friends, Strato, Volumnius, Dardanus, and spoke plainly of what must come. "I will not be paraded through Rome in chains," I told them. Some wept openly. Others nodded in grim understanding. I spent those final hours writing to my beloved Porcia, entrusting the letter to a loyal freedman who might escape the enemy's net. Dawn approached, and with it the enemy. I embraced each friend in turn, thanking them for their loyalty to Rome. When the moment came, I asked Strato to hold my sword. "Not as my servant," I said, "but as the final service of one Roman to another." He turned his face away, but did as I asked. I ran upon my own blade, feeling cold steel pierce my chest. Strange how little pain there was. Only a great weariness and the taste of blood in my mouth. As life ebbed away, my thoughts turned not to Caesar, but to Rome herself. Had I served her well or hastened her fall? The Republic I loved had died long before this battle. Perhaps with Sulla, perhaps with Caesar's first crossing of the Rubicon. My vision darkened, but I felt strangely at peace. "Tell them," I whispered to Strato, "I died more gladly than I lived." My last thought of Porcia's face, and then darkness. The Republic and I fell together. Death came swiftly in the chaos of Philippi. I watched, detached from my mortal form, as my body lay among the fallen. Antony himself found me there, his face a curious mixture of triumph and sorrow. How strange to observe one's enemy in such an intimate moment. He stood silent, then ordered his men away. For a moment it was just the two of us, my empty vessel and his contemplative gaze. This was the noblest Roman of them all, Antony declared to his officers. I heard his words echo across the veil between life and death. He spoke of me with unexpected reverence, claiming I alone had acted for Rome rather than from envy of Caesar. Such praise from an adversary, how peculiar the judgments of history. While others plotted from jealousy, he said, I had struck only for what I believed was right. They built my pyre with the honor due a consul. The flames rose high as my earthly remains returned to ash. Antony ordered my remains collected in an urn of polished marble, a vessel fit for patrician blood. My ashes would journey to Rome, to my mother Servilia's waiting hands. Even in death I returned home. How she would weep, that formidable woman who had loved both me and Caesar. My fellow conspirators met varied fates. Cassius, dear Cassius, had fallen by his own sword before me. Others were hunted down and executed, their heads displayed in the forum. Some, like Messala, made peace with the victors, choosing pragmatism over principle. A few fought on briefly in distant provinces, but the cause was lost. The Republic died with us at Philippi, its last defenders scattered like leaves in autumn. I watched Octavian and Antony divide the world between them. They called it peace, this absence of republican liberty. Cicero's voice silenced forever. Cato's principles becoming mere philosophy rather than governance. The Senate, once sovereign, now nodded to masters rather than serving as master. The irony cut deep. I had killed a would-be king only to birth an empire. Caesar's legacy lived, while the republic I cherished faded into memory. My greatest tribute came from my greatest enemy. Antony, who fought to avenge Caesar, honored me as the only honest man among the conspirators. What strange justice the fates weave. I struck to preserve the Republic, yet hastened its end. I killed in the name of liberty, only to be remembered for the nobility of my intentions rather than their outcome. Perhaps that is all any mortal can hope for. Not success, but the dignity of righteous failure. How strange it was to watch my name echo through the corridors of time after my death. In the early days of Augustus's reign, I became the villain in every official account. The young emperor needed to paint me as a traitor to justify his own rise. Cicero's defense of my actions was systematically erased, his own writings burned. My statues were toppled, my family name whispered only in shadows. Plutarch treated me with more fairness decades later, portraying my struggle between friendship and duty. Poets found more complexity in my story, even as they condemned me. In Dante's vision, I found myself placed in the lowest circle of hell alongside Judas and Cassius, forever trapped in the mouth of Lucifer for my betrayal. Yet, beneath these official condemnations, whispers of Republican sympathy persisted in private homes and philosophical circles. As Rome's imperial centuries unfolded, my legacy shifted with each new ruler's insecurities. Those who feared appearing tyrannical rehabilitated aspects of my story. Others who craved absolute power vilified me anew. Tacitus wrote of me with grudging respect, seeing in my actions the last gasp of the republic he mourned. My name became less a man and more a symbol, invoked whenever power threatened to concentrate in a single hand. Centuries passed, and new republics rose. They claimed me as their ancestor, though they understood little of Rome's complexities. In Florence, my profile appeared on medals celebrating liberty. In revolutionary France, my name was shouted in blood-soaked streets. In America, men debated my actions while forming their new nation. None of them knew me. The man who wept at night, who doubted even as he acted, who loved Caesar even as he killed him. The question that haunted me in life followed me through eternity. Can violence ever truly serve justice? History offered no clear answer. For every scholar who condemned my dagger, another praised my principles. The deed itself became a template for all political violence that followed, justified or condemned based on the outcome, not the intent. Caesar fell, yet Caesarism rose stronger from his blood. I had killed a man but empowered a system. Perhaps no society could ever truly understand what we attempted that day. The questions we faced of power, liberty, and the right to rule remain unanswered across millennia. Each generation finds its own Brutus in my story, its own Caesar, its own republic to save or condemn. My spirit watches this eternal cycle with resignation. I made my choice with a clear conscience but clouded foresight. History judges me still, and will until the last human contemplates power's corrupting touch. After death, perspective became my eternal companion. I, Brutus, who once lived by certainty, now dwell in the realm of questions. The centuries have washed over Rome like tides, yet the question of my deed remains. Was killing Caesar an act of patriotism or betrayal? I have watched empires rise and fall, seen republics born and die, all while pondering whether my blade served liberty or merely changed her jailer. I remember the morning of the Ides with painful clarity. Caesar's smile as he entered the Senate. Cassius's nod. The weight of the dagger beneath my robes. Had I hesitated a moment longer, had I spoken to him privately instead, might Rome's story have unfolded differently. I killed not the man, but the idea he represented, yet in his absence, that very idea grew stronger. The republic I cherished died with him. What would you have done, you who judge me across the vastness of time? When friendship and duty collide, when personal loyalty battles with love of country, which altar receives your sacrifice? I loved Caesar, yet I loved Rome more. Or did I? Perhaps I merely feared what Rome might become under his rule, without truly understanding what she already was. The greatest irony haunts me still. In striking down Caesar to prevent one-man rule, I helped birth an empire of emperors. The very system I opposed flourished in the chaos we created. Octavian, whom I underestimated, built upon Caesar's foundation a structure more permanent than anything the Republic had known. My blade opened not freedom's door, but tyranny's different path. Power corrupts even the noblest heart. I witnessed this in Caesar, yet failed to see how ambition had infected us all. Cassius's envy, my righteousness, Cicero's compromises. We were not immune to the disease we diagnosed in others. Beware this eternal truth. Those who claimed to act solely for the common good often serve their own vision of what that good should be. Am I murderer or martyr, traitor or patriot? Perhaps I am all these things, as complex as the times that shaped me. My question to you, inheritor of history's lessons: what principles would you die for? What truths do you hold so sacred that blood, even a friend's, is not too high a price? Judge me if you must, but first ask yourself what you would have done when facing your own Caesar.